Dracula, Prince of Darkness. Two couples traveling in Eastern Europe decide to visit Carlsbad despite dire local warnings. Left outside the village by a coachman terrified at the approach of night, they find themselves in the local castle and are surprised at the hospitality extended by the sinister Clove. It turns out the owner, Count Dracula, dead for 10 years, has been hoping for such a visit. This is the second Hammer Dracula movie with Christopher Lee, but the first one without Peter Cushing. Horror of Dracula had Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing together, and the sequel, Brides of Dracula, had Peter Cushing, but not Christopher Lee. And now, Prince of Darkness has Christopher Lee, but not Peter Cushing, which is kind of unfortunate. Peter Cushing was one of the best actors Hammer Studios ever had, but the movie replaces with another character, Father Sandor, who is a priest who knows about Dracula and the vampires from before, so he kind of takes over the Van Helsing role. He's played by Andrew Keir, and he's one of my favorite characters in the movie. He doesn't have a huge part, but when the movie comes to an end, he is one of the people that defeats Dracula and saves the day. And he's also the character who teaches the main characters of who Dracula is and what a vampire is. So he's sort of Van Helsing, just more religious, you could say. The movie is directed by Terence Fisher, who through the 50s and 60s became the most well-known horror director, and today is probably looked at as one of the best horror directors of all time. He directed most of the best Hammer horror films. A lot of the Frankenstein movies and the Dracula movies, and a few other Hammer thrillers. And you really don't need his name on the screen, because you can tell if a Hammer movie is directed by Terence Fisher or not. That's just how it is. He was one of the more unique directors in the studio. Dracula Prince of Darkness has a great mood and a really creepy atmosphere. Castle Dracula, I think, looks much better than the previous. It looks more menacing, and it stands on the top of the mountain. It just looks a lot more like a Dracula castle than the one we got in Horror of Dracula. Prince of Darkness also takes a lot of things from the novel, something that Horror of Dracula, though it was based on a novel, it didn't really follow that closely. Now, I don't say Prince of Darkness followed the novel closely, but it did take some elements, such as Renfield, who wasn't in Horror of Dracula. It's not a huge part, but you definitely know it's Renfield because he has a real interest in flies. One of my favorite scenes in Dracula Prince of Darkness is the resurrection scene. The music, cinematography, the acting, everything looks so creepy, and it's a really well done, well directed scene, and it's one of my favorite. And looking at a critical perspective, I'd say it's probably the best scene in Dracula Prince of Darkness. One of my main problems with the movie is the main characters. They are not very interesting, and you don't care for them that much. They often remind me of the slasher films from the 80s, where a lot of the characters are just set up to be killed, and they don't really have much to do with the plot, and you don't really find them that compelling. They're just there to be killed or learn about Dracula. And my other complaint with the movie is Christopher Lee has no dialogue. Apparently he hated the dialogue, so he refused to speak any of it. Either way, even though he doesn't have dialogue, I think Christopher Lee is amazing as Dracula. He's really scary, and he has a really menacing and demanding presence whenever he's on screen. Dracula Prince of Darkness is probably one of my favorite Hammer Dracula films of all time. Sometimes when I think about it, it might even be my personal favorite. I love the mood, I love the setup, resurrection, and Father Sandor is a nice replacement of Van Helsing. Definitely a movie I would recommend, and my rating for Dracula Prince of Darkness is 4 out of 5. So definitely check it out, it's a great watch.